Hey everyone, you should have gotten an email from me, but I will just say welcome on behalf of the whole Sit Reps to Steerco's team. So I hope that everyone enjoys the memes, and we're really hoping that we can also have some really good dialogue here. So I'll hand it off to John. He is at Leland. They're doing some amazing stuff for vets, but also just kind of changing up the whole way that the MBA coaching market works, and I'll let him explain a little bit more about what that means. So yeah, John, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Wyatt. Excited to be with you all tonight. I was telling Wyatt I was feeling the pressure of picking a song to listen to with all these veterans. So you can make fun of my song choice. I'm sorry I didn't get anything better. We have a packed agenda, so we're going to spend an hour on the panel, going in depth with Laura, Wyatt, and Matt, and just try to get as much information and value to you as possible. And then we have club representatives from a ton of different business schools logging on, and you can kind of bounce around to different sessions. So hopefully this is filled with value. Make sure you sign up for Leland if you haven't already. We dropped the link in the chat. We're going to share a bunch of free resources like MBA resume templates and recommender prep docs and all the stuff that you need to be successful. So make sure you do that. And
John,
go
just,
for it.
just real quick, we do in fact, fresh off of paternity leave, we do have the OG Sit Reps with Steercos who wants to pop in and say hi.
Would love
so
that. Yeah, hop in, Kyle.
He says he's here.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm fresh off paternity leave. I'm still definitely on paternity leave. But thought I'd stop in and say hi and just say I appreciate everybody who follows the page. Thank you for coming to this. I mean, I think we had almost like 400 signups, which is kind of mind blowing to see that the impact that this community has, I think, on veterans in general. And I wanted to say thank you to Leland, to John, and for helping host this, and Laura as well. Everybody, Matt, everybody who wanted to participate and help out. I think this is a noble cause, right? Which is why I continue to do this after 3 years. So, but yeah, I hope everybody gets something out of it, and and also a big thank you to Wyatt for putting this together. He's often one of the behind the scenes guys able to do this. He's just super great. Somebody should hire him, pay him a lot of money. But yeah, I hope everybody enjoys, and I'll pass it back over to you, John.
Thanks, Kyle. I actually just had a baby a couple weeks ago too, so I'm in the pain cave with you, not getting any sleep. Thanks for making this happen. All right, so just as a heads up, we're doing kind of an MBA week this entire week, if you're not aware. So Erica will drop a link in the chat. We have like a deep dive into letters of rec strategy, writing essays strategy, how to fund your degree on Thursday. So you can sign up for any of these events with the link that you just dropped in the chat. Hopefully you'll join us. It's all free. It's all meant to be helpful to you. So yeah, excited to jump in. I'm just gonna do quick introductions. I'm John. I'm the CEO of Leland. Graduated from Stanford GSB with my MBA. Went through this process several years ago, and try to be as helpful as I can for other MBA applicants, but very excited to lean on the expertise of our coaches. You'll also see Erica, Amelia, and Josh in the chat. Big thank you to them for helping coordinate everything. And I'm most excited about the panel. So I'm going to kick it over to Wyatt, Laura, and Matt to do just quick introductions on them and their experience with MBAs. Wyatt, why don't we start with you, and then we'll go to Laura and then Matt.
Yeah, great. I was a 2017 U.S. Military Academy graduate. Then I was in the 4th Brigade of the 25th Infantry Division. So up in Anchorage, Alaska, I was a medical service corps officer that served in an infantry brigade that was airborne up there. I really decided that I wanted to get out and pursue an MBA, and probably around the year 3 or 4, leaned really heavily on veterans that I didn't pay as much, and I was really frustrated really by the fact that there was kind of this like free option, and then there was like a $10,000 to $15,000 option. There wasn't a lot in between. I wish Leland was around when I was applying, because it would have obviously been a lot easier to find someone just for a few hours than having to decide between free, which is what I did, and some $15,000 to $20,000 options. So I'm at Wharton right now. and currently in between year 1 and year 2, working at a tech startup in the legal tech space. And I really try to focus on helping, especially, officers, but also enlisted, really kind of understand how admissions wants to see kind of a, not to be too melodramatic, but like a hero's journey, right? Trying to figure out how you can, in a very, very short amount of time, meaning you 1-page resume and like a page to 2 pages of essays, stand out from the crowd and really, shine through a pool of a lot of different people, right? That are all very exceptional. So really excited to be here and participate in the panel, and then also be in the Wharton room when we break out for Vets Clubs.
Take it away, Laura.
Okay. I'm Laura Nelson. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you all for your service. I'm not a veteran, but I do have service members in my family, and I really admire what you all do. Little bit about me. I'm a graduate and former AdCom member at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business. So I'm here to represent the AdCom point of view along with that of a consultant. I've coached hundreds of MBA candidates in the last 14 years, helping them get into their dream programs. And I really focus on all of the aspects of the process, from the initial strategy to the execution of the application. My sweet spot really is with non-traditional applicants, definitely veterans included. So that's another reason why I'm really excited to be here with you guys tonight. Additionally, I'm a member of the Association of International Graduate School Admissions Consultants, so I get a lot of access to AdCom members throughout the year. And yeah, thanks again. I'm excited to dive in.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Matt, bring us home.
Yeah, hey everyone. Nice to see you all. My name is Matt Kilby. I'm a Naval Academy graduate, 2014. I was a submarine officer for 5 years on the USS Florida guided missile submarine out of Kings Bay, Georgia. As you see on the screen here, went to MIT. I was actually a super nerd there. So I did the LGO program, which was the MBA and an MS in mechanical engineering. And while I was there, I was the president of the Vets Club. So I was able to see a lot of the vet applications and kind of help a lot of vets through the journey there at Sloan. Right now, I'm a project leader at BCG in our DC office, do the majority of my work in industrial goods, both commercial and A&D, and do some nonprofit work as well. Been helping vets apply to business school since 2019, really, once I got in myself. And again, kind of similar to Wyatt, found myself when I was applying to schools in 2018, kind of stuck between two extremes, right? Someone volunteering their time and you felt like a burden to the like $15,000 like crazy kind of costs that are out there. So I'm really excited to be part of the Leland team and think they're doing a great thing here. So excited to chat with you all today.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, you can see we have a range of experiences here with Wyatt as a student, Matt as an alum, and Laura as a professional admissions consultant. It's great to get these different perspectives and different schools, which is excellent. Okay, we'd love to hear from you. We know there are people behind these faces and on the call. So if you could drop in the chat where you're dialing in from and branch of the military that you're serving in currently or served in the past, I would love to hear from you. It's always fun to see where everyone's at. We got Austin, Georgia, Baltimore, DC, Japan. Nice. We got a few Japans, Georgia, Wisconsin. All right, we got all over the place. This is great. Wow.
We have a Space Force. They're coming. That's cool.
That's cool. Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, it's fun. It's always fun to see this. And I hope you feel the community both here at Leland and with the folks on the panel and just the other people applying. It's a stressful process. There's a lot of questions, a lot of things to figure out, and it's fun to know that you're not going at this alone. Okay, we're gonna do just a quick overview of Leland so you know who we are. We're gonna spend most of the time on the panel, but just figured it'd be helpful to set the stage. So we're trying to build and currently are building the one-stop shop for for you to reach your most ambitious goals. And that could be anything from applying to top MBA programs to applying to other master's degree programs to pivoting into consulting or banking. We do career coaching as well as admissions coaching. We're a marketplace, which means we have people like these amazing coaches who run their own business through our platform, and we take a much smaller take than what you'd get at a traditional admissions consulting firm. So prices tend to be much more affordable, and you can get a coach for a few hours of time, or you can get a coach end to end. You can get a coach that's a current student, a little bit more affordable, and you can get a professional admissions consultant that was an AdCom member like Laura. And so, kind of it's meant to meet you where you're at. We have coaching, we have group classes, and we actually just launched Leland Plus, which is a content offering where you can read example essays, you can watch videos from coaches. You can see example resumes, all the different pieces of the puzzle, so that you can start to gauge where you're at. And it's an even more affordable option that can be a nice complement to coaching. So we're doing a promo on Leland Plus this week for anyone that's attending MBA week. Would definitely encourage you to check that out. Yeah, that's us. I think the most important piece of all of this are the faces behind the products that I just mentioned, and many of them have probably even worked with folks on this panel, or the folks on this panel could create multiple slides with their own candidates. It's fun to see them go from people like yourselves wondering if it's even possible to stepping foot on these campuses, and these are just a few of those folks. So that's Leland. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be around. And hopefully we can help many of you. We have several service members that are coaches on the platform, or specialize in helping people like yourselves. And with that, let's go over to our panel. I'm really excited to get your thoughts. So just to kind of set the stage, how should a veteran think about their work experience? Could seem a bit non-traditional. It is a bit non-traditional. Maybe we'll start with Matt, because you went last in the intros. How do you recommend veterans think about positioning themselves in business school applications?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think for me, when I work with clients and vets, I think the biggest thing to think through is demilitarizing your service. And I think, that can rub people the wrong way. But what I mean by that is the admissions committee is not going to understand what you did in the military. Like you could, if I was saying like, hey, I was on the nuclear propulsion plant and I was like checking gauges and stuff, they'd be like, I don't understand what that means. So you need to think through ways to simplify your resume and your stories, to really make sure that your experience translates to kind of civilian terms. So I think one tactical way to do that is, obviously you have coaches that are professionals at this, but something that I did was, if you have a significant other, who's not in the military or anything, like read this, does it make sense, right? So I think that's one thing that should always be top of mind. And then kind of sit back and realize that, our experience is not going to be, startup founders or consultants or things like that. Like that's a completely different applicant pool that schools are going to pick people from. You should be very confident in your military service. You should be very proud of that service, and you should try to quantify all of your successes, and tell those powerful stories throughout your application in like a career story arc. So, I think to summarize, again, the biggest point here is demilitarizing it and making the translation, as clear as possible so that it's easy to read for the admissions committee.
Yeah, that's great. Wyatt, anything you'd add on how you thought about it or how you help people think through this?
Yeah, I totally echo what Matt said with demilitarizing and making sure people understand what really is impressive. There's a lot of things that you can do in the military that sound very unimpressive when you first say them, and someone might have no idea that what you did was a truly elite instance. There's also things in the military that sound incredibly good and actually might not be as elite as possible. And I'm reminded of a time at the beginning of Wharton when I was with a person from MARSOC, so Marine Special Operations. It's a very impressive group of people. I was airborne in the military in the Army, which is a course that you just are told to go to. It's not a difficult course. You jump out of airplanes and that sounds very elite. And one of our classmates heard that the kid was in MARSOC and they kind of went, oh, I don't like, they didn't even ask what it was. And then they heard that I was airborne and they're like, wow, that's like really special. And the MARSOC guy kind of like smiled at me because it's obviously much less special. But I also tell people, you have to remember you're trying to stand out. So, putting things on your resume that every other person has done, so if you say, I've got the AAM, right, the Army Achievement Medal, everyone's gotten one of those. Or if you're like, oh, well, I got an ARCOM, once or twice. Well, everyone else did too. I managed a platoon, right? That's also something that probably everyone's done. So you need to figure out, what did I do that other lieutenants, captains, other people in my unit weren't doing? And how do I make it so that when an ADCOM reads my resume, it doesn't look like every single of the other 90 veteran resumes they're looking through? Because you really want to stand out, right? There's a lot of exceptional vets. If you're not standing out, then there's really going to be difficult to get that spot that they're giving to veterans.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Laura, I'd love to hear your thoughts as an ADCOM member. How do you help veterans think through this?
Yeah, I think, landing on standing out, I'm going to reiterate that a lot tonight, because I know, you guys are all used to kind of fitting in because you've been conditioned that way, right? And this is a process where it is good to stand out and to demonstrate where you've been exceptional in your career, because admissions committees, they're looking for that track record of leadership and achievement. And as Wyatt mentioned earlier, you have so few opportunities, for example, that one-page resume to do so. So, wherever you can quantify and however you can highlight those exceptional things you've done, that's going to help your cause. One other thing I'll say here is that you really have to think about how a business school is the bridge to your future, and what skills you have today that will facilitate that short-term goal, and what skills will the business school experience provide, right? A lot of admissions committees are really focused on that short-term goal. Long-term goal can be bigger, more esoteric, but short-term goal, really helps them hone in on how they can help you land that dream job after business school. So you're really thinking about, what you want to do, what you have today in place, and what you need from business school will really help create that career arc and story.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks all for sharing that. I think kind of in the same vein, a lot of people worry about their lack of business experience. Obviously, business schools love veterans. I had several amazing veteran classmates that didn't have any official business experience. How do you think about that? Maybe we'll start with you, Laura. Should they be worried? How do ADCOMs think about this type of experience and categorize it?
So no, absolutely, you should not worry if you don't have business experience. And I'm a perfect example of that. While I'm not a veteran, I came from the TV and film industries before business school, and I had no idea what a consultant did or an investment banker did. I couldn't believe those jobs existed when I came to business school, or why anyone would want to be a banker. But, what I think is really special about business school as opposed to some of the other disciplines is that so many different types of people can find a place there and thrive. So as long as you have kind of dialed into that short-term career arc that I talked about and are connecting the dots as to how business school helps your case, you can find a place there and be successful.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on because I think we have some other questions that I want to really dig in on. What maybe just from your perspective, Matt, what is it about the veteran experience that business schools value that then these folks can take and hopefully make shine in their applications?
Yeah, I think for one word, it would just be leadership, right? Like, you're competing against a lot of applicants who have been individual contributors in their careers. Like, I think about the fellow BCGers that are applying to business school as like an associate or a consultant, right? Like, they have only ever been given like one stream of work, and like that is their responsibility, and then like they can go to sleep at night. Whereas in the military, you're responsible for like human beings' lives. Like, it is a very different experience for when you're applying to business school. So I would just like really lean in on that aspect and the leadership skills and the soft skills you've developed over your career in the military. And then I think being able to provide that perspective once you're on campus and kind of, project manage and kind of like lead those small teams, because once you're a business school, it's not like undergrad, it's not a bunch of individual assignments, right? It's team-based work for the most part, right? So you're kind of that core member that can provide that leadership and guidance throughout a semester at a business school. Wyatt, do you have any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the perspective is probably the biggest. I mean, Laura can obviously speak to this from an actual adcom, but just my anecdotal evidence in classes, the fact that in the military you see a cross section of every piece of America in ways that you'll have classmates that have worked at amazing corporations, from JP Morgan to Google to Procter and Gamble, and they've been surrounded by mostly people that are like them, right? And coming from the military, you've been immersed in a cross section of society that is just different, right, than every other person in the military, right? That was like what I really valued about the military. And when you go to business school, not just having that as a perspective of how do people think and how does the business world operate, but just being able to have that empathy for other people and being able to think. Because the fact is, like, no matter what you try to do in the Army on your side job, your classmates are going to be so far ahead of you on finance, on business knowledge. Like, don't try to come in and be like, I'm going to be up to speed with them, because guys like John, who have been working in product for 5 years, will come in and be like, oh, that's cool that you did a Coursera course. But what people don't have is, like Matt said, they had an individual contributor job, and they'll lean on that kind of empathy and that perspective that you bring as a vet.
Yeah, I love that. Laura, anything else you'd add?
I think the guys put it incredibly well. The ability to, demonstrate leadership, be resourceful, the character can really shine through, ability to thrive under pressure. And as Wyatt said too, like, diverse experiences and unique contributions are a big part of, what your cohort can bring.
Yeah, that's so great. I think if you just look at some of the schools' mottos and what they're trying to do, I mean, what is Ross's like school motto? Stanford's is change lives, change organizations, change the world. Harvard's is educate leaders who make a difference in the world. It seems like they're all, I don't know, Laura, do you have Ross's that you could share?
Well, our big brand has been action-based learning, which I think, works well with this group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it seems like they're all trying to get at this like concept of leaders who are action oriented, who want to make an impact, who want to make an impact in the world globally. I can't think of a better experience than the veteran experience before business school. Matt's absolutely right. Don't underestimate your own experience. Also, many of you apply to business school with more years of experience. I know this because I had kids going to business school, and most of my friends that we lived by were all the veterans who also had kids who were maybe a little bit older. And it's okay, many of them did not have kids, but it feels like they have these several years of team building, leadership, and inspiration that can definitely translate. Okay, so moving on to the next question. It is similar, but maybe we'll kind of focus this question on like, how do I pick the story or my story? There's so many different pieces of a veteran's experience. How do you kind of narrow it down to these heroic stories, as you mentioned, Wyatt, or even if they don't have necessarily a heroic story, kind of paint themselves as that hero or underdog? Yeah, maybe we'll go to you, Wyatt, first. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, and not it's tough because you don't want to seem, I think Laura already talked about this, where vets don't want to start saying like, I am the reason for my unit's success. But you sort of you have to, right? You have to start shifting into this, and not just for business school, but for every job you ever take, right? People want to take on people that they know have done really, really well. So weaving your story, not just in the Army or Navy or Air Force or Space Force, but not just your story as a vet, but being able to weave that so it feels like you're reading someone's story and not just kind of this haphazard mix of things, right? Your application should be a story that looks like, okay, this person has a really coherent understanding of what they're doing. And like, you use the hero's journey analogy where it's like, this person needs an MBA to fulfill some sort of, vision, and not just for them, but like for the whole world. And so if you can look at your veterans experience and be like, okay, what have I done that really it's really taught me interesting and unique things, right? So like when I was a medical service corps officer, I really leaned on being able to talk about working with medical doctors, with PAs, with, HIPAA kind of level stuff, and being able to understand how that side of the world operates, which is a very unique thing compared to most military applicants. And then talking about, why do I need an MBA? It's because I've never worked in the civilian sector of medical care. And this is something I need to kind of leverage these really unique experiences. And I quantified that, I had a lot of stories that I was able to talk to make that point. But really figuring out what is unique about what I've done and telling it in a story, right? I mean, telling it in a way that an AdCom is going to remember you, and it's going to stand out and be really interesting. So that's kind of what I would say.
Yeah, maybe just to kind of like drill into that a bit more, Matt, like do people need to know what they want to do after? Is that part of the story? Like I know it's hard to get the exposure to know exactly what they want to do. How do they pick something? I'm curious. And does that need to tie kind of into the story that they're telling, the heroic story?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the way I've always approached this with, the individuals I've worked with is it is always great to have an idea of what is interesting to you. No admissions committee is going to, on day one on campus, say like, you're going to recruit for consulting, like you said you were. Like, no, you could completely blow it off. That being said, to Wyatt's point, right? Like I try to think of the career arc as three bullets on like a line, right? There's like where you are now, there's where you want to be, and then there's this big bullet in the middle that is like MIT MBA, right? Like, and I have to go through that bullet to get to my short-term goal. So I think being very clear of, here are the skills I have today, here is my short and long-term goal tomorrow, and like why I have to go to your school to get there is a very important story arc to tell. And the story that you pick from your military experience that really shows like where you are today is important. And then as a subset of that, each individual school has like different essays, right? I'm an MIT Sloan grad. Like we've had the same cover letter every single year. It is, we want people who can redefine solutions to conventional problems and strive to preempt unconventional dilemmas with cutting edge ideas. So I always tell people applying to Sloan, you need to tell a story that you redefined a solution to a conventional problem, like every time, right? So if there is a specific line in a specific school's essay that you can think of a story that kind of hits that, like, look, I've shown that I am that type of person, that is obviously the default. But again, kind of think about that career arc as well that I mentioned, and the kind of three bullets in a line.
Yeah, that's great. Laura, I don't know if you have anything else to share. And there was a question that came through in the chat about kind of quantifying or qualifying the experiences that may be a little bit tricky to do so for the admissions committee. Anything else you'd add on this question?
Yeah, and this question in particular, I think both Wyatt and Matt set this up incredibly well. One thing I'll just add here is, when I'm in the brainstorming process with my clients, I always get this question: what do they want to hear? Right? What are they looking for? And I know that is very tempting. Everyone is trying to fit what the expectation is, but really avoid that, step back. And again, follow this advice and be, authentic about your experiences. And again, what makes you unique. Don't think about these as essays, think about them as personal narratives. And, a lot of us like to say show by telling the story rather than telling of the story where you're just telling a sequence of events, because you really need to be efficient with your words. You don't have a lot of them to answer many of these questions, and every word counts.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite professors at Stanford, he was a writing professor. He would say, your challenge is to be one in a million, not one of a million. And I think it's really hard when you look around and you feel like, oh, I'm doing the same things as these other people. But I think everyone is a lot more unique than they think. And you're going to get in because you are unique, not because you blend in or you are what they're looking for, as you mentioned. Okay, great. Laura, I'll kind of kick it back to you. Do I have to have all of the best stats? And if I'm not in that range, does that mean I'm out of the game?
Short answer, no. Long answer is that, these are simply averages. So when you read the class profiles, and I recommend you do, just to calibrate where you might be in terms of competitiveness at your target schools, take a look at the test scores, take a look at GPA, but also take a look at the 80% range if it's available, and see where you fit in the distribution, because that's going to be a lot more helpful than simply the average. And, if you're not at the average, think about where you can improve, right? If it's your test score, can you make time for another attempt? That's one idea, right? If you're, if it's your grades and you have a couple months, can you take a graded course like, online UCLA Extension, online UC Berkeley, where, you self-pace through a pre-MBA course and get an A? Those are a couple ideas to kind of help mitigate around some of these averages, but don't get scared off by the averages.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. I think the other thing that I hear a lot of the time is like, oh, I have either a bad test score or a bad GPA or some other kind of weird blemish on my track record. How do I manage that? And it seems like there's certain things like you just suggested to try to get around it or to try to make it better. And then I think it's just ownership. It's saying, here's what happened in this situation, and I didn't do as well because of this reason. And it's not an excuse. This is what happened, and move on. Like they're not gonna let you in because you have no weaknesses. They're gonna let you in because you spike in a certain area. And I think that's important to remember. Okay, so this one, maybe we'll kick it over to Wyatt and Matt. Maybe we'll start with you, Matt. Why is an MBA even worth it? How's it been worth it for you or other veterans that you've helped?
Yeah, I think like everyone follows the SitReps page, so everyone is probably very on board with the SitReps memes that are always like, I think the MBA is worth it. I think for me personally, right, like I was getting out of the military like directly from the submarine. I didn't take a short tour, so I was kind of like, I felt like I was going into something I was not prepared for, and rather than kick the can down the road on a shore duty for 2 years, I wanted to like further my career by going to business school. I think it's a great avenue for people that aren't quite sure what they want to do yet. Granted, that contradicts the whole like you need to know what you want to do for your MBA application, but it's a period of your life that you'll never have again, where it's 2 years of just literally exploring what you want to do, and about a year into that, you'll be the most marketable you ever will be in your entire life, probably. Like you will never have this many companies like courting you than you will at an MBA program 1 year in. Like it's pretty insane. So that was kind of like my thought process going through it. Clearly, I'm in consulting now, so I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. But business school at least taught me some things that I didn't want to do. So I think again, worth it from a perspective of, even if you don't land the dream job or figure out, this is the career I'm going into, you get exposure to so many different things and so many new people and a strong network that you can rely on, for the rest of your life. Yeah,
that's great. Wyatt, anything you'd add on that?
Yeah, I will say, apart from like my first year at Wharton was so fun. Like I'm sure Matt and Laura would confirm the same. Like I just have so much gratitude for the chance that I've had to go. And this is mirrored by my friends at every other B school. Everyone that has gone will say like, it's a pretty fun time. And largely because like Matt said, you get to figure out, luckily I did not do the COVID B school experience, but largely because you have this freedom to totally redefine yourself. Coming out of the military, you are so immersed in everyone that only knows the military, and you'll hear so much bad advice and so many people that tell you that with a West Point degree and a military background, you'll get handed a job at XYZ company making $150,000 a year. And most of my classmates that really rushed things, a lot of it was kind of this feeling of like, I just need to get into the civilian sector, right? Like I just need to get out there. I don't want to delay. I feel like I'm going to do an online MBA, which please don't do that, right? If like Matt said, if you haven't seen the Kansas, online MBA, the Fairfield Inn memes, Don't rush it. Like, you've been in the military. The civilian world is so different. Like, there's no profit and loss in the military. Just learning how to operate and having those 2 years to figure it out. Don't let costs intimidate you, especially as a veteran. Like, I've had so many classmates that say things like, well, yeah, I have GI Bill or I have voc rehab, but like, what's the deal with, how do I pay for everything else? And I'm like, I have classmates that gave up jobs at JP Morgan where they were making $300,000 a year and they're paying full price. Like, if they can give it up, you should probably consider it. You totally get to redefine yourself and figure out what the civilian world's all about, because coming out of the military, there are so many, the unknown unknowns that you just get hit in the face with. So it's just this amazing kind of like cheat code to just reset and figure out what the world's about. And like Matt said, be very, very marketable in a way that you're not coming out of the Army unless you have some really specified skill, right? Which is the exception.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Yeah, I mean, even as someone that had kind of come from the business world, had explored a bunch of these career paths, I learned so much just from going to an MBA program and learning from all these people coming from different backgrounds, including the military. Some of my closest friends came from the military and came from like I had a lunch with a neurosurgeon, a hedge fund manager, and a Navy SEAL. And I was like, I don't know if I'll ever have a more diverse lunch in my entire life than this one. And that's the kind of stuff you get at business school. Okay, we're going to kind of whip through a couple of these other things because we are running out of time and we want to make sure we cover everything that we have slated. Maybe just I'll kick this one to you, Matt. How do you think about cost here? It's really expensive. It's obviously an investment. Are there any other funding options that you thought about or how did you think about this?
Yeah, I think first piece would be like focus on getting in first and then figure out funding later. I always have people come to me like, well, how am I going to afford it? And it's just, let's focus on getting in first and then we'll have a separate discussion. So that's my first thing. I actually had no GI Bill. So I did 5 years and 8 days, not that anyone's counting, and you need 5 years and 90 days as an Able Academy grad to get GI Bill. So I had like zero GI Bill funding. So I had to get pretty creative. Some of the things I recommend that can be a pretty serious dent in the cost are, one, doing the reserves. I know like probably a lot of people are eye rolling, but if you factor in the cost, the reduced cost of healthcare and the monthly payment you get and the 2 weeks active duty service, it was like, I think $18,000 to $19,000 delta over the 2 years. Like that's pretty significant, especially at whatever percent interest rate loans are at right now. I think 2 would be offer to be a TA your second year. So I think it was almost $10,000 being a TA over 2 classes second year. So that right there, it's like $35,000 of tuition that I didn't have to take loans out for. So I would just encourage you to get creative. I mean, student loans are intimidating. There are some great companies out there. Juno, I think, is one of them that uses collective bargaining essentially to get the lowest rate. So like there's a lot of creativity in the space to make this more affordable. There are obviously scholarships out there. Do your research, but I wouldn't be afraid of doing the reserve gig for 2 years. If you want to cut the cord completely, totally understand. But again, for me, it was a pretty significant delta.
Yeah, you'll also be shocked at how much money you can actually get from schools. They do fellowships and other scholarships. Juno is actually great. Juno's sponsoring MBA week, so we love Juno, they're a partner. And I think there's just a lot of options. So don't let that stop you. Maybe I'll turn this one over to you, Wyatt. There's a lot of options for help: service to school, veterans clubs, paid coaching like Leland. What do I actually need to be successful in this process?
Yeah, I'll say I was watching Danny Ainge. I'm a big Utah Jazz fan, and they got a really good trade yesterday. And he said, when something's free, you take it. So that's the first piece of advice, right? If something's free, like at least look into it. The flip side of that is when something's free, you won't get the kind of attention. And I'm not saying, go out there and pay a bunch of money, but just remember, and think about in your own life. If someone comes and pays you $100 to do something, you're probably going to do it with more intentionality, and you're probably going to be able to hold that person accountable. When someone comes, and I look at it like I had a pretty negative experience with a free option when I was applying to school, and the vets clubs were all pretty helpful, but there were definitely degrees of that. So I would definitely say, don't go all in and be like, oh, I'm only going to go and like pay for help. Like, you can probably get it pretty far on your own, brainstorming, talking to people. Like, I wouldn't recommend going to get a Leland coach to ask what an MBA is and like, should I get an MBA, right? Like, you can do that pretty cheaply and through vets clubs. Now, if you want to ask like, hey, I'm applying to Ross, I have a pretty good draft of my essay. Well, like, maybe there's someone, that can help me, or like, hey, I really want to go to Ross, and there's this person named Laura Nelson that's like, hey, I was an adcom there, right? I can help you out. Probably going to be more helpful than someone that, maybe just got into Ross. But, from my own perspective with Wharton, right? The adcoms don't come and tell us like, hey, this is exactly what we want. You start to see patterns and you start to see and understand things, but free help is always going to be free, right? And so take it, look into it, but definitely don't think that it's bad to look for help. That's another thing about, and I've used Leland myself for career help, right? Because it's a better experience than I've had just asking people for help for free. So I'm a paying customer and a coach, of Leland, because I think that you can get a better service if someone's, people. Yeah. And Allison, totally right. Opportunity cost, big thing, right? So figure out what you need, and kind of gauge it for yourself. There's not a one size fits all for this.
Yeah, that's well said. Well, I think the biggest thing here is that you're the captain of the ship, your application journey, and you know better than anyone what you need and what you don't need. Oftentimes people underestimate it till the last minute, so don't do that. Definitely dig in early and try to figure out like, what is it going to take for me to write 6 and 7 or 7 essays that are at the quality bar that I need to actually get in, because you don't want to do this. We see this all the time where people come to us and say, hey, I went through the process alone last year, it didn't work, I want help, and then they do it and they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, was going at this totally wrong. So explore all the options. Leland's meant to be flexible, meet you where you're at. Great. We have 2 more quick questions. I'll give this one to you, Matt, and then I'll give maybe the last one to Laura, and I guess we can all kind of wrap it up together. But you're on campus as an MBA student. What resources exist? This one actually may even be better for you to bounce around to the different rooms and see what resources exist. But maybe what resources existed for you at MIT Sloan?
Yeah, I think largely gonna depend on the school. What a consultant answer, it depends. But I think like at Sloan, for example, we had the Vets Club. We had like a group chat that everyone would talk the recruiting tips, things like that. And then what you'll see during recruiting is like each of the different firms will typically hold smaller sessions for veterans. For example, BCG, McKinsey, they will come to, Sloan and hold a case prep session with just veterans. So like a much smaller group, more one-on-one time. There will be plenty of, affiliation group events for vets for all the different recruiting, PM stuff, consulting, banking. So I think you see a lot more outreach than you expect outside of the typical Vets Club from the actual companies, which is great to kind of get that real personal, like, what is it actually like to work there perspective.
Yeah, that's cool. I definitely see a lot of this. Like once you get in, you have the community on campus, but you also have all the veterans that have graduated from that school for years. And oftentimes they're coming back to recruit because they're looking out for people like themselves that were going through that transition. All right, we'll actually do this for everyone. But Laura, we'll have you start off. What are your last tips, final tips for helping veteran applicants succeed in this application process?
Sure. As I mentioned before, what makes you different helps you stand out. So really lean into this. Don't be afraid of it. Don't try to fit in, because this is your moment to, really differentiate yourself and your experiences. There's, as I mentioned before, there's all types who can be successful in business school. So don't let imposter syndrome or some crazy stats scare you off, because I've seen candidates from all walks of life be successful, and really like the hardest part is getting in. And once you're there, a world of opportunity opens up for you. Getting started can be the hardest part, but if you get started early, you'll have, a lot more, flexibility and, higher quality input going into that application.
It's awesome. Wyatt, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I would just echo, what we've been saying. Think about how to make yourself unique. Don't think that you need to stay in further if you want to get out. But at the same time, if you want to be in the military and you want to serve and you feel like there's unfinished business, like, the civilian world will always be here. So don't think that you need to stay in to be more competitive, but also, take an inventory of your own life. You'll get out and you're going to have so many different options. Yeah, really excited for everyone. I'll be in the Wharton breakout room with some specific stuff from Wharton AdComs if anyone wants to be in there that's more specific just for what Wharton looks at. More than happy to continue to chat over there.
It's great. Matt, what do you got for us? Bring us home.
Yeah, I'd actually go back to something Laura mentioned and might have glossed over, was don't underestimate the power of a really good brainstorming session, either with a coach or yourself. Like the time sitting down and reflecting, like actually reflecting and thinking through your experiences thoughtfully and bouncing them off someone is a very good use of your time rather than jumping into writing an essay. So don't underestimate self-reflection and the brainstorming period. And again, think about the line and 3 dots and how they connect, and make sure each part of your application is unique and different, and avoid duplication.
Awesome. Thank you. Can we just show some love in the chat for these panelists? This is so helpful. I learned a lot about applying as a veteran. This is great. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. Really, really appreciate it. And hopefully many of you, I actually have already seen, many of you have already started reaching out to these folks. Highly recommend you do. They're going to fill up. They're in high demand. And we're just very grateful for taking the time tonight. So thank you. And with that, we will kick it over to what I believe. Oh, I guess, yeah, make sure you stay in touch and sign up for Leland Plus if you haven't already.